The film begins in a large, modern city whose name remains unknown. A young taxi driver suddenly loses his sight while driving, causing him to stop his car in the middle of the road. A passerby offers assistance and takes over the driver's seat. As they drive to the taxi driver's home, he describes his condition, explaining that it feels like he sees shadows floating in a fog. The helper is surprised by this description, noting that blindness is typically associated with total darkness. When they reach a crosswalk, the helper informs the driver that they have arrived at his home. As soon as the taxi driver steps out of the car, the kind helper unexpectedly accelerates and drives away, abandoning the helpless man in the middle of the road. Stranded, the driver appeals to passers-by for assistance, and one person kindly escorts him home, helping him reach his apartment. Upon arrival, the taxi driver's wife expresses deep concern for her husband's condition. In her worry, she quickly finds the contact information for an ophthalmologist and arranges for her husband to see the doctor. She is particularly shocked by the audacity of the thief who robbed a blind man so easily. At the appointment, the doctor examines the taxi driver but finds no visual impairments. After documenting the examination results, he advises the young man to be admitted to the hospital for a comprehensive checkup, suggesting that further investigation is necessary to understand his condition. The couple returns home after the doctor's appointment. Meanwhile, the doctor continues his practice, examining various patients, including a child, a woman in dark glasses, and a one-eyed old man. Later, he returns home and shares the details of the strange case with his wife. They enjoy a quiet evening together. Meanwhile, one of the doctor's patients visits a pharmacy to buy medication before taking a taxi to a hotel, where she works as a call girl. Following the doctor's instructions, she keeps her dark glasses on but is not surprised when her vision suddenly turns white. In a panic, her frightened client throws her out into the corridor in her negligee, prompting her to seek help from the hotel staff. The next morning, the doctor's wife wakes up early to prepare coffee. Suddenly, the doctor announces that he can't see anything, fearing he has been infected by the previous day's patient. He experiences a panic attack, and only with his wife's help does he manage to calm down enough to contact his colleagues. As they begin to document the strange cases of sudden blindness, they remain puzzled about the cause. The phenomenon of white blindness spreads quickly, and an ambulance arrives to take the doctor away. His wife attempts to join him, but the paramedics refuse her until she claims that she, too, has suddenly lost her sight. The couple is taken to a facility that has been repurposed for quarantine, as declared by the government. They are the first occupants of a large room, numbered 1. Despite the doctor urging his wife to admit that she can still see and return home, she steadfastly refuses. Soon, more patients arrive in the ward, including the taxi driver, the thief, the call girl, and a child. The taxi driver recognizes the thief by his voice, leading to a confrontation that the doctor barely manages to quell. As time passes, the group begins to settle into their new environment. The doctor's wife takes it upon herself to help them adapt, guiding them to the toilet and advising them to count their steps and memorize the layout of the room. An unfortunate incident occurs when the call girl accidentally scrapes the thief's leg with her heel. Since the doctor is unable to provide medical assistance, his wife administers first aid. She worries about the potential introduction of an infection due to the lack of antiseptics, but her husband urges her to let it go, emphasizing that they cannot change their situation. One day, while taking a walk, she hears guards warning that only infected individuals are permitted in the facility. At that moment, more people arrive, including a police officer, a pharmacist's assistant, a hotel maid, and a financial advisor, who is revealed to be the taxi driver's wife. Upon hearing her familiar voice, the taxi driver calls out, and they manage to find each other with difficulty. The newcomers settle in, but when the doctor requests medicine to help the injured, the guards threaten him and his wife with guns, insisting they return to their ward. As isolation from the outside world continues and the number of patients grows, living conditions in the quarantine facility begin to deteriorate. The call girl takes the child under her care, who keeps asking for his mother, while the maid recalls the woman in glasses who infected her, unaware that she is nearby. Food soon becomes scarce. The only sighted person, the doctor's wife, tries to call emergency numbers, but no one responds. The following day, a new group of patients arrives, including the ophthalmologist's assistant. The doctor's wife works hard to maintain order, suggesting they stretch ropes between the wards to help people navigate. Meanwhile, the doctor focuses on the toilets, as the patients are unable to see what is happening there. Patients often go outside to escape unpleasant odors, but their spirits plummet. One day, the taxi driver's wife falls into a deep depression and stops communicating with her husband. Concerned about the lack of soap, the doctor's wife is thankful for the availability of water and insists that everyone maintain hygiene practices. One day, a one-eyed old man arrives in their ward with a radio, sharing the grim news: many people have been infected within the first 24 hours. Helpless doctors are caught in endless conferences, uncertain of what to do, but soon they, too, begin to go blind. Weeks pass, and more individuals are forcibly sent to quarantine. A bus accident occurs one day, claiming 23 lives, and on that same day, two planes collide, causing widespread panic. With accidents on the rise, people start staying home. By now, nearly everyone has gone blind. After sharing his story, the one-eyed man plays music on the radio, and as everyone listens in silence, it feels like a nostalgic greeting from a brighter past, bringing many to tears. As more people arrive at the quarantine facility, the guards struggle to maintain order and, fearing the infected, begin shooting at anyone who breaks the rules, even inadvertently. The first deaths occur, prompting the residents to request a shovel to bury the deceased. The doctor's wife goes outside to retrieve it, continuing to pretend she is blind. She finds it challenging to hold back her emotions when she realizes the guard is mocking her. Silently, she picks up the shovel, surprising the guards, who attribute her actions to quick adaptation. The doctor urges each ward to bury one of the dead, but others refuse to heed his call. When it comes time for fair food distribution, an armed patient from the third ward declares himself king and takes control of all the food supplies. Meanwhile, the thief develops an infection and soon realizes that the doctor's wife can still see. It becomes increasingly difficult for the doctor's wife to hide her sight, and she often finds herself in tears. One night, the thief goes outside and provokes the guard into shooting at him. The following day, the doctor and a few others from his ward bury the dead. The doctor confesses to his wife that it's hard for him to accept her care, but she urges him to come to terms with it and walks away, taking advantage of his blindness. The next day, the king announces new rules: anyone who wants to eat must pay for their food. He mockingly sings for everyone, demanding his supporters sing along. Tensions rise as a real battle for food breaks out, but no one dares to resist, fearing the weapons. The king begins demanding valuable items in exchange for food and soon realizes that the doctor's wife can see. The doctor tries to rally the others for resistance, but they no longer see the value in their jewelry, believing it useless in their current situation. People begin to remove their expensive possessions, which the doctor's wife collects and gives to her husband to exchange for food. He suddenly realizes that one of the king's henchmen is blind from birth, which explains his tyrannical control over food and valuables. The doctor attempts to shame him, but ultimately, their ward receives far less food than they need. Consumed by guilt over the situation, he refuses to eat. The call girl tries to persuade him to accept the new order, explaining how difficult it is to live after taking someone else's life. They share an intimate moment, which the doctor's wife witnesses. Later, she confesses to the call girl that she can see and forgives her for what has transpired. A week passes, and the people run out of valuables. The king then orders that women be brought to him and his henchmen in exchange for food. The doctor's wife tries to plead with the guards, but they respond that they are already giving everything they can. Arguments erupt among the residents. Some men call for defiance against the king's demands, while others are willing to share their women. The doctor opposes his wife's participation, but he feels powerless to enforce his opinion. Ultimately, some women, including the call girl and the doctor's wife, volunteer to go in exchange for food for everyone. The taxi driver attempts to stop his wife, but she insists on leaving. In total, 9 women volunteer. The doctor's wife leads them to the third ward, lining them up in a chain, which elicits cheers from the king and his henchmen. An orgy begins. The doctor's wife finds herself with the king, who has long remembered her voice and now seeks revenge for the insults she previously hurled at him. Later, the women return, bringing with them one of their own who has been killed in the heat of the moment by the king's henchmen. They do their best to clean her up and say their final goodbyes. The next night, the king announces that he and his henchmen expect the women from the second ward. A blind man, born without sight, comes to inquire if the women from yesterday have recovered. The doctor's wife sadly informs him about the death of one of them. He falls silent and leaves. Determined, the doctor's wife takes scissors and heads to the third ward. She finds the king occupied and kills him, but the blind man recognizes her by the sound of her footsteps and grabs a gun. He orders her to be captured, but the women flee. Before escaping, the doctor's wife promises that for each day without food, one resident from the third ward will die, and she won't miss. She tells her husband everything, and he realizes they are on the brink of war. He orders the doors to be barricaded. After some arguments, the men in his ward suddenly decide to go and simply take the food. 12 volunteers gather, led by the doctor's wife, but at that moment, one of the rape victims starts a fire. The king's henchmen, frightened, begin shooting, causing chaos as people run in all directions. The doctor's wife leads those from her ward into the courtyard, calling for the guards, but no one responds. The woman opens the gates and realizes that no one is guarding them. The infected make their way into a half-ruined city filled with garbage and corpses. Surviving groups clash over food in every corner. The doctor's wife finds a relatively intact store and leads her group inside, ordering them to lock the doors and not let any other wandering groups in. Her husband accompanies her, and she reassures him that only the blind are around. Soon, they discover a looted supermarket. The woman circles it and finds a descent into a basement filled with food. She fills entire bags, but as she prepares to leave, a crowd that has caught the scent of food follows her. The doctor helps her fend them off and manages to drag her away from the raging group. After moving a little distance away, he leaves her to go back for a lost jacket. The woman sits on the steps, watching as nearby dogs tear apart the body of a dead person. She weeps in grief and horror as the rain begins to fall. The doctor's wife heads to a nearby church where one of the pastors is attempting to preach. There, she spots her husband and rushes out to him. They return to their people, who are washing in the rain and rejoicing in the water. The group is ecstatic to see the doctor and his wife back, rushing to hug them. Later, as everyone rests in the store, the doctor's wife suggests they move to their home. It's big and comfortable, providing enough space for everyone to settle down. They express gratitude that their leader can see. The group sets off. As they walk, the doctor's wife describes the surroundings, while the others share details about themselves, their hair, eyes, and features, so their friends can visualize them. Soon, they arrive at the house. The door is locked, but that doesn't mean no one is inside, so they proceed cautiously. The doctor's wife asks everyone to remove their dirty clothes, assuring them there are enough clean clothes for all. They tidy themselves up, joking about their appearances for the first time. The doctor's wife helps everyone wash thoroughly. Suddenly, an old man with one eye confesses that he feels happy. He has found a family, and for the first time, he desires to live with others, helping and caring for them. Later, everyone gathers around the table and raises a toast to the human family. In the morning, the doctor's wife tidies up and proposes a meeting to establish rules of conduct, as food supplies are dwindling. Suddenly, the first infected, the taxi driver, announces that he can see everything around him. His sight has returned as unexpectedly as it had vanished. People rush to embrace one another, realizing that blindness is temporary. Joy spreads as they understand that the disease will soon pass, and they will be able to see again, this time, truly opening their eyes. The doctor's wife suddenly comprehends that her heavy burden has lifted, and she is free. The film showcases people of various ages, nationalities, genders, and professions, united by a shared misfortune, yet reacting differently to the disaster that has befallen them. One thing remains unchanged, the realization that a person must remain human, and it is this humanity that can save them and guide them toward the light, even in total darkness.